Chapter 689, Evil Demons of the Demonic Sect. This chapter is updated by novels.pl. The blue-robed man lifted the teapot by its handle and poured Chief a cup of tea. Then, he filled his own cup. He smiled warmly and said, "I suppose that refreshing tea is rare in the Yin and Yang sect, so I brought you some from back home. Have a taste, and see if it's overbrewed." A magnetic draw in the blue-robed man's voice charmed any lady who heard him. Chifa lifted up her cup of tea and took a tiny sip from it. "It tasted just right." "Not bad," she said. A red fire pterosaur the size of a palm emerged from the man's sleeve. It flapped its wings and flew in front of Chifa. The two appeared to be rather intimate. Although a red fire pterosaur was not a true dragon, it was still considered a rather powerful 7th-level savage beast. When fully grown, it could tear up a saint. It was surprising to find someone who could actually rear a dragon. The blue-robed man had his eyes fixed on Chifa from the start. Smiling, he said, "Look, Fire Cloud is so glad to see you, and so am I." Chifa stretched out her snowy white hands and held on to Fire Cloud. Heartlessly, she said, "Let's get down to business." There have been some recent changes within the Yin and Yang sect. Out of nowhere, a Tower of the Sword Genius suddenly appeared. He must have ascended the 3rd-level mountain of Ancient Gods Mountain. The man said, "Lin Yue." "Yes." Chifa nodded and continued, "Since you have already heard about him, I suppose you are aware that he is making progress in leaps and bounds. If the Yin and Yang sect continues to nurture him, it could upset the plans of the demonic and Four Symbols sects." He smiled faintly and said, "There's less than half a year before September 9th. I do not expect him to accomplish much within this time frame. Regardless of how naturally talented he is, it won't be difficult for a person from the Four Symbols sect to seize victory at the Sword Pavilion. As long as the Sword Pavilion is taken over by the Four Symbols sect, then our sect will definitely be able to get back the treasure sealed within the Sword Pavilion. It will be a piece of cake getting the Four Symbols sect to submit to us." Shifu said, "What if an accident happens? You should know how useful the treasure in the Sword Pavilion is to us, the demonic sect. We can't take any chances." The man's expression became severe as he said, "Is Lin Yue, the Yin and Yang sect disciple, so powerful? Are you overestimating him?" Chief Fei replied, "The Lin Yue of today is not the same as before. I suspect he possesses some hidden power. If, in fact, he represents the Yin and Yang sect in future battles, all our planning over the years may go down the drain." "What do you intend to do?" asked the man. Chifa replied, "To be completely safe, I've decided not to conceal my power. I'm going to take part in the Sword Technique Conference. I think I will be able to suppress Lin Yue, even if he is accomplished in Tower of the Sword." He pondered for a while before responding, "The more excellent your performance, the more dangerous it would be. I don't wish you to take this risk." The man's ear twitched, and his gentle eyes turned cold. He looked up and said, "Who is that?" "Show yourself." A shock went through Chifa's mind. She had never suspected that someone was trailing her all the way to the temple. If her identity was exposed, not only she would get in trouble, but so would the Kiz. Swoosh. The blue-robed man pointed at the top of the temple, and a black light shot from his fingertip. In an instant, a hole 3 meters in diameter had appeared in the temple. Xu Chenxing was lying belly down on the tile roof of the temple, injecting the holy chi from his entire body into invisibility beads. Line of inscriptions flowed out of the invisibility beads to transform into 36 chains of holy chi. They bundled up to form a sphere that wrapped around his body. The black light columns broke the 36 holy chi chains in a flash. With a crash, the invisibility beads in Xu Chenxing's hands were pulverized. Immediately, his body materialized in midair. Xu Chenxing had been keeping an eye on Chifa for a while. When he detected her exit from the suzerain, he secretly followed her using invisibility beads to get to the bottom of this. Xu Chenxing was stunned to find out Chifa's identity. She was actually a demonic sect saintess. What was even more shocking to Xu Chenxing was that the demonic sect was collaborating with the Symbols sect to seize something from the Sword Pavilion. He needed to inform the suzerain. What a powerful master. Xu Chenxing glanced at the blue-robed man, and his eyes filled with fear. The invisibility beads had been a gift from a Yin and Yang sect saint. He only had to hold them in his hands, and the inscriptions would camouflage him from all 5 of a half-saint's senses. The blue-robed man was definitely not a half-saint. However, he had pinpointed his position effortlessly. This man had to have very sharp senses. How could the Kiss collude with the demonic sect? They will bring destruction upon themselves. I must rush back to the suzerain to inform the master. Since his identity was exposed, Xu Chenxing dared not stay another moment. He quickly performed an inferior-class ghost-level bodily movement. His body transformed into a light stream. Like an arrow released from a bow, he shot up into the air. "Where do you think you're going?" Centipede 8 and Bird 9, who were standing guard outside the temple, simultaneously leapt into the air to pursue Xu Chenxing. Centipede 8's body expanded rapidly to transform into a 200-meter-long black centipede, exuding the aura of a savage beast. Lightning could be seen faintly, flowing over its entire body. The pair of wings on Bird 9's back expanded rapidly into 2 enormous blue clouds. These clouds mobilized the wind from an area of 300 square miles to form a blue cloud vortex which sucked Xu Chenxing into its swirl. The next instant, the powerful whirlwind carried Xu Chenxing back to the temple. "Are you trying to run? Where do you think you're going?" Bird 9 laughed as her slender long arms transformed into 2 razor-sharp claws and thrust towards Xu Chenxing. Hot flames shot from the pair of claws and turned into hundreds of flaming feathers. They spun rapidly towards Xu Chenxing. Xu Chenxing drew a flexible golden sword from his waist. With a wave of his hand, golden sword chi appeared and filled the space above him. He quickly used a ghost-level mid-class sword technique. Clomp, clomp. Xu Chenxing's sword technique immediately shattered Bird 9's flaming feathers into pieces. They turned into sparks that dispersed in all directions. The flexible golden sword collided with Bird 9's claws, forcing her to retreat. Xu Chenxing was a talent of the Yin and Yang sect, with outstanding abilities. Furthermore, having successfully refined a glaze pellet, he had reached the 9th change in the fish-dragon realm to become one of the most excellent half-saints. Seeing that Bird 9 retreated, Xu Chenxing immediately pushed off the ground, shot into the air, and fled. "Come back!" The blue-robed man, standing at the top of the stairs at the temple, stretched out a huge hand and grasped thin air. Usually a gentleman, he now exuded an imposing aura. His deep-set eyes were cold and commanding like a demon emperor. He gathered spiritual chi from heaven and earth quickly over Xu Chenxing's head and condensed into an enormous demon hand. Its fingers were about to close on Xu Chenxing. Blue sky demon handprint. "You are." Fear was written all over Xu Chenxing's face as he guessed the blue-robed man's identity. Unfortunately, his entire body was enveloped in the demon hand before he could say it out loud. His bones cracked loudly and his blood oozed out of the hand. Xu Chenxing's corpse fell with a thump in front of the temple. He was just a mass of bloody flesh, and even his bones had been ground into powder. The blue-robed man retracted his palm and opened up the oiled paper umbrella. He resumed the bearing of a gentleman and said, "Go back first, Fu. I will handle the rest." Chifa glanced at Xu Chenxing's dead body, took the umbrella, and walked to the edge of the cliff. She took a step forward and began floating down the cliff. Eventually, she disappeared among the rain and fog. The blue-robed man watched her depart with a warm, kind smile on his handsome face. The palm-sized pterosaur standing on the man's shoulder also watched Chifa leave. Swoosh! Zhang Yuochen, clad in a robe and mask, rushed through the dense forest, as Blackie had directed. He wanted to catch up with Chifa. Halfway through the journey, Blackie emerged from Zhang Yuochen's chest, landed on the ground, and began sniffing. Zhang Yuochen put his hands behind him and looked at Blackie in doubt. "Can you do it?" Who would have expected the heavy rain? The rainwater has washed away her aura. Blackie wagged his tail and rolled his eyes in frustration. "Forget it. Let's go back first since we have lost track of her whereabouts." Zhang Yuochen was about to return to the Yin and Yang sect, when he felt through his spiritual power that somewhere far away, heaven and earth spiritual chi was contracting at an alarming speed. "Wait!" Zhang Yuochen leapt to the top of a pine tree. Stepping on the pine needles, he opened Sky Eye from between his eyes. It transformed into a pillar of light and turned towards the spiritual chi fluctuation. He saw a gigantic tornado sweeping trees and large boulders from the ground. There must be a battle in between masters going on. Let's go check it out. Zhang Yuochen rushed towards the vortex of wind. After a little while, Zhang Yuochen stopped in his tracks suddenly as he realized that the spiritual chi fluctuation had completely vanished and all was calm. How could a battle end so quickly? Zhang Yuochen wielded Sky Eye once again to search the area. Very quickly, he spotted a Taoist temple on a mountain peak nearby. The sky was dark, with only occasional flashes of lightning. The Taoist temple, however, was emitting some faint light. It appeared especially spooky amidst the desolation. Zhang Yuochen mobilized his spiritual power and wielded the rolling thunder skill, transporting himself to the top of the mountain to arrive at the temple. The air was heavy with the stench of blood. He could see a bloody corpse lying on the ground nearby. Even its robe had been torn to pieces.